So in this lecture, we will talk about layer 2. In the case of layer 2 interfaces, there are different applications that you can utilize layer 2 interfaces. Going over the type of interfaces here, you have layer 2, you have layer 3, tap, virtual wire, and HA. In layer 2 interfaces, you have a VLAN attached to this interface. You have two types of VLANs. You have a layer 2 VLAN, layer 2, and then you have a layer 3 VLAN interface. Layer 2 interfaces gives you a lot of flexibility as far as what you can do in your environment. So one example would be to have a firewall with multiple interfaces. Each interface, let's say, has a different type of servers, and all those are on the same VLAN. The first interface have the email servers, second interface has the web servers, third interface had the load balancers, and then they're all on the same VLAN. However, traffic going from one type of servers to the other goes to the firewall. So each interface is in its security zone, and security zone, we're going to explain security zone in a later section, but security zone is a segment that combines hosts with the same security requirements. So in this case, I have those three interfaces. The three interfaces are in layer 2, and they can communicate to each other, but each interface in a different security zone. So I can control traffic going from the mail server to the web server, from the web server to the load balancer, and vice versa. So I have complete control over the traffic going across. So those interfaces are layer 2 interfaces, and they are connected to a VLAN, and this is a layer 2 VLAN. So that's an example, right? You can have the router also configured on another layer 2 interface. So in order for those segments to get out, they would need to get to the router through the layer 2 VLAN. The router is in the same layer 2 VLAN, and then they get out through the router. However, the Palo Alto firewall has a layer 3 VLAN that gives you the ability to get out and route traffic from a layer 2 VLAN to the outside. So instead of connecting the router to an interface that's layer 2, you can have the router interface on the firewall itself. So in this case, we would have the same setup here. I have my servers. They're all connected layer 2 interfaces. And the layer 2 interfaces, each interface in different security zone, controlling the traffic between the different type of servers, and they're all in the same layer 2 VLAN. And then you have a layer 3 VLAN or layer 3 VLAN interface that will be the default gateway of those servers. If the server want to get out to the internet, for example, they will get to the layer 3 VLAN, and then it will route the traffic to, it could be another layer 3 VLAN, or it could be an Ethernet layer 3 interface. You have the flexibility of doing that. There's also another scenario of doing layer 2 VLANs. You can put the firewall transparently in the path of the traffic. So let's say you have a segment that's, has servers, and you want to introduce the Palo Alto firewall to see what's going on. Let's say you have a, malicious attack or something going on, and you want to introduce the Palo Alto firewall. You can basically split that segment in half, and then connect the segment to the Palo Alto firewall. Here's layer 2, and then on a different layer 2 interface, and then basically create a layer 2 VLAN, layer 2 on the Palo Alto firewall, L2 VLAN, that basically will bridge the traffic between the two interface. And this way you put yourself in the middle without using virtual wire. So this could be something you can do. So it's not only limited to just one VLAN. You can have multiple VLANs on the same layer 2 interface. And the way you do this is basically you create a layer 2. Let's say I have this interface is layer 2 interface. This is layer 2 interface. And I have VLAN 100. That's my default VLAN. And I want to also trunk VLAN 200. So basically what I would do is create a sub interface here for VLAN 200 and a sub interface for VLAN 200. So traffic from the same interface, I can have multiple VLANs going across and have the firewall be in the middle. So that's another scenario. So we'll simulate those example in UnitLab. UnitLab is covered on section 2. So on UnitLab, you log into the web interface and then click on Add New Lab. And then we're going to call this Layer 2 Deployment. And then click on it and then open. And then first thing we have to do is create a network for PSNet 0, which is a bridge interface to your existing network. And then we're going to create a Palo Alto node. Call this PFW. And then we're going to connect the management interface so we can manage the firewall. And then we're going to connect Ethernet 1.1 to the network. So what we're going to do here is bridge the network, use layer 2 interface to bridge my home network basically, and bridge that to a different interface on the firewall using layer 2 interfaces. So Ethernet 1.1 will be the outside interface, and then I'm going to create a new node here, test Linux node. Add a Linux node, tiny core. Oh, I'm going to change this to 256 meg of RAM, and connect that to the Palo Alto firewall, Ethernet 1.2. So here, basically, Ethernet 1.1, this is the firewall. Ethernet 1.1 is my home network. And then Ethernet 1.2 is where the Linux machine is. And this is going to be a layer 2 interface. A layer 2 interface. This is in a security zone. We'll call this inside. And this is security zone outside. And we will use the VLAN interface to connect the two interfaces together. And this is layer 2. So right now we're talking only layer 2. And this will allow traffic to go across and have the firewall in the middle, protecting whatever is behind it. So let's go ahead and start the VM. So now that it's started, I'm gonna connect to it, manage it, give it an IP address so I can manage it. Log in, and then configure, set device config, IP address, system, IP-address, netmask, commit. So now I should be able to access it from here. Once you log in, you go to interfaces, and then Ethernet 1.1, that's the outside interface. We're going to click on it and change it to layer 2. And then VLAN, we're going to create a new VLAN. We'll call this VLAN, any VLAN home, anything really. And then security zone, that's going to be the outside. So we're going to create a security zone outside. And then click OK. We need to first bring the interface up. And then Ethernet 1.2, that's the inside facing the Linux VM. And VLAN, I'm going to choose VLAN home. And then we're going to create a new zone called inside. And then advanced, bring the interface up. And then we're going to create a security policy to allow everything. Source is any. Destination is any. Action is allow. and then click commit, commit. And then if I go to reboot up once it finished installing here, I'm going to go ahead and boot up the Linux machine and connect to it, and I should be able to get to the internet. I'm going to go to application terminal, ifconfig. I have an IP address. You can ping www.google.com. You can ping. So traffic is going through the firewall, and it's basically layer 2 VLAN inside out. So that's basically an example of layer 2 deployment and bridging two interfaces on the same VLAN. So in my next step here, I'm going to simulate having interfaces on multiple VLANs. So I'm going to create a switch, a layer 2 switch. So we're going to add a Cisco iOS 3725, and we're going to choose the NM16E switch. That's the switch. We're going to give it a icon switch layer 3, and then we're going to create two, and we're going to call them switch, and then save. So now I have a layer 3 switch here and layer 3 switch here to simulate my trunking. I'm going to connect Ethernet, fast Ethernet 00 here to, I need to expand the number of interfaces. So let me expand the number of interfaces first. Edit, edit, and then make it 8 interfaces. And I'm gonna stop and restart. And then I'm gonna go ahead and connect the switch. So let's draw it out here. So Ethernet 1.3. So this is the firewall. Ethernet 1.3, 1.3, and then 1.4. We'll have the default VLAN, and then we have a sub interface for VLAN 100. We're going to put Linux machine here, Linux machine here, a Linux machine here, a Linux machine here, and verify that they can talk to each other. Because this is layer 2, we need to assign static IP addresses to the machine, so I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. That's fast Ethernet 00 is connected to Ethernet 1.3, and fast Ethernet 1.4 is connected to F01. Okay, so it's F01. Oh, let me change it. Go ahead and delete that. Make F01 F01, and then I have I'm gonna add 4 Linux tiny cores. 4. Make sure you change it to something small. So I have 4 here. Tiny 7. I'm going to connect Tiny 7 here to Ethernet fast Ethernet 1.0. That's going to be VLAN 1, and that Ethernet 1.0 fast Ethernet 1.1. That's going to be VLAN 100, and then this is VLAN 1 and VLAN 100. So now I'm going to configure the switch. I'm going to take it off connect mode. Start, 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 start. That's why you need a beefy machine, because otherwise your machine will choke. My test here is I want to be able to pass the traffic across the VLAN using sub interface, and so basically in effect trunking. So this interface will be a trunk interface, this interface will be a trunk interface. And the firewall will have the main interface with the default VLAN and the sub interface with VLAN 100. Main interface with default VLAN, sub interface with VLAN 100. We're going to assign IP addresses here statically so we can ping across, and assign IP addresses so we can ping across. And that will show you that layer 2 with trunk, so you can have a trunk instead of just one VLAN on a port. So let's go back to the firewall. I probably need to reconnect. And then I'm going to configure the network, Ethernet 1.3. So that's going to be my inside layer 2. It's going to be my outside. I'm going to create a new VLAN. We'll call this VLAN default switch. Security zone outside, and then bring it up. And then I'm going to click on add sub interface here. See, add sub interface to create sub interface VLAN 100 Ethernet 1.3. And then tag, you have to add the tag, that's the 802.1q tag. And VLAN, we're gonna choose the new VLAN because that's VLAN 100 switch. And then security zone outside as well. So I have sub interface created, Ethernet 1.4. I'm gonna do the same. Make it layer 2. VLAN, that's VLAN default switch. Security zone is inside. Advanced, bring it up. Okay. And then add sub interface. VLAN 100. Tag 100. The VLAN is VLAN 100 switch. And then this is inside. And then okay. Did I bring it up? So if you see here, this is the untagged. The untagged will come in on that interface. This is the tagged with tag 100 will come in this interface. And basically the firewall will bridge what's coming in from the untagged on Ethernet 1.3 to what's coming in to go out Ethernet 1.4. What's coming in with tag 100 on Ethernet 1.3 to go out Ethernet 1.4 sub interface 100 tagged with 100. So that's basically the idea. So we're going to go ahead and commit, and then now we need to configure the switch. Fast Ethernet 01 is the trunk interface. Interface fast 01 switch port. That probably has to be the switch interface. That'll be module 1. So I need to change that. So let me go ahead and I need to stop it and then basically start it again. Change the interface assignment. Edit interfaces, and I'm gonna disconnect this one. Disconnected, and then click OK. And I'm gonna disconnect this one too. Then now I'm gonna connect it again, but I'm gonna connect it to that's connect mode, and then connect it to 1.2. Oh, I need to stop this one as well. So let me, oh, it's committed. So I just need to stop the firewall and start again. Connect mode, and then I'm going to disconnect this one. And then I'm going to connect Ethernet 1.2 to Ethernet 1.3. And then I'm going to disconnect Fast 1.2 to Ethernet 1.4. And then I'm going to start the firewall one more time and start the switch one more time. Okay, so let's connect to the switch now. And then basically we need to configure this interface F12 as a trunk database. We're going to first create a VLAN database, VLAN 100, to create VLAN 100, exit. And then config T interface F12, switch port mode trunk, switch board, basically trunk allowed VLAN all, but I'm gonna go ahead and put spanning tree port fast. Okay, and then on fast Ethernet 1.1, I'm going to configure this to be an access port on VLAN 100. Switch port access VLAN 100. And then switch 4, do the same. Config T, interface F12, switch port. Well, I have to create the VLAN first. VLAN database. And then VLAN 100. And then exit. Interface VLAN interface F12, switch port mode trunk, span port fast, and interface F10, F11, this one, switch port access VLAN 100. And then I'm going to connect to, so Tiny 7 and Tiny 4 now are bridged across the firewall. So I'm going to connect to Tiny 7, and basically I'm going to go to terminal and configure the IP address of the interface. Sudo su, you have to be sudo, and then ifconfig. Okay, so that's Tiny 7. Now configure Tiny 5. For 192.168.2.2, sudo su, ifconfig 192 if0 192.168.2.2 netmask 255.255.255.0 ifconfig, and then ping 192.168.2.1. I see some so I had to power off all the machines and power them back on again, because sometimes when you add interfaces it just acts up. So right now we see it in the middle, so I have Tiny 5 and 7 talking to each other. I'm going to configure Tiny 8 and 6, so that's going to be sudo su ifconfig is0 192.168.3.1 netmask 255.255.255.0, and then Tiny 6, that's on VLAN 100. Configure this sudo su ifconfig is0 192.168.3.2 netmask 255.255.255.0, and then I'm going to go ahead and ping the other side, and I can ping it. So I have a CLI open, and I can see here the actual traffic going across the pings. If I do show session ID, one of the sessions, I should see here that ingress interface is Ethernet 14.100, egress interface is Ethernet 13.100. It's hitting the rule allow all, it's identifying the application, and it's recording the flow. So it's a great way of putting the Palo Alto firewall in the middle of your network without, a slight, basically a small disruption, and basically have the firewall cross the network. And then if you have a situation where, one way you can do this is basically you have a switch environment, you have multiple VLANs, you have multiple switches, right? So you have switches, and you have multiple switches in your environment, and basically you have multiple VLANs. This is a trunk. This is a trunk. You can put the firewall on this side, assuming that the active trunk is this guy here. You can put the firewall on this side, and then fail over the VLANs. If you do spanning tree changes, you can do spanning tree changes and gracefully move it to the other side, and then put the firewall here. So then you have the firewalls covering your entire network. So let's say this is your data center. You can basically have a firewall capturing traffic and protecting your network transparently as a layer 2 in a layer 2 deployment in your environment. So that's one big advantage of this. So there's additional scenarios that we need to talk about for layer 2 deployment. We'll cover them in following lectures.